I was once the first woman to design life support systems for spacecraft. But the thing that suffocated me came from my own granddaughter. She hired an old actress to cry on camera pretending to be me while keeping me locked in silence. If you think this is just another family drama, you're wrong. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next shocking episodes we bring to you. It begins with rain. Seattle doesn't whisper when it cries. It howls through pine trees, smudges the skyline, and paints the city in slow, mournful grays. The camera glides low across puddles on a walking path by Green Lake, where the still water reflects a lonely figure wrapped in a dark green coat, one gloved hand gripping a weathered cane. Her gait is slow but certain. She doesn't stumble, not yet. A voice dry and deliberate fills the silence. They used to call me a genius, a prodigy, a woman who cracked codes and built futures. Now, I'm a number in the system, a dot in the aging database. Beatrice Monroe, age 70, once the youngest propulsion systems analyst at NASA in 1974, now just a name attached to a mailbox in a duplex north of the University District. She walks alone unnoticed. The few joggers who pass her barely nod. She doesn't mind. She's had enough of applause. What hurts isn't invisibility. It's being remembered only for what you used to be. The camera follows her home, a quiet duplex on a mossy tree-lined street. A garden untended. Paint flaking on the mailbox that still reads Monroe. She pauses at the steps, staring at the wind chime hanging crookedly above the porch. Then just before she knocks, the door bursts open. Grandma B. Amber's voice is sunlight cutting through clouds. 21, caffeine-eyed, always barefoot. Amber Monroe is the kind of college student who drinks oat milk and edits videos at 3 a.m. She hugs Beatrice too tight, like she's trying to squeeze meaning out of the moment. Her arms smell like vanilla and stress. Beatrice smiles, eyes crinkling, voice soft. I've only been gone 40 minutes. Amber giggles. That's long in TikTok time. They step inside. The house is small, cluttered in a cozy way. Half bookshelves, half wires. A peculiar mix of old tools, science magazines, and soft furnishings in bold college kid colors. There's a tripod set up in the corner, its red recording light blinking. Amber waves a dismissive hand. Ignore the camera. I'm just doing some test angles. Beatrice raises an eyebrow. Test angles for what? Amber pauses, biting her lip like she's been waiting for this. Okay. You remember how you told me that story about the Mars emergency? When you rewrote that launch code on a cocktail napkin because the onboard system fried. Beatrice chuckles. The napkin was a checklist. But yes, I remember saving $250 million before lunch. Amber beams. Exactly, that's gold. It's incredible. It's inspiring. Beatrice shrugs, suddenly bashful. It was just my job. No, Amber says, locking eyes with her. It's a story, and people need it. I need it. Beatrice doesn't answer. Her gaze drops to the floor somewhere between suspicion and sentiment. She's always had trouble accepting compliments. They felt like closing arguments to a life that hadn't reached its final act. Later that night, the camera lingers inside the kitchen. A kettle whistles as Beatrice scribbles something in a leather-bound notebook. She always writes in cursive, even now. A list: groceries, Amber's prescription flu shot. Ordinary things. On the counter beside her sits an iPad glowing softly with notifications from social media platforms she never visits. Amber dances into the room, laptop under one arm, socks mismatched. I've got something to show you. Beatrice eyes her suspiciously. Is this going to require passwords? Amber laughs. Nope, just trust. She taps her keyboard. The screen behind her lights up with a YouTube channel banner, Inspire Nana. Real stories from real grandmothers. Beneath the title, a banner photo of Beatrice frozen mid-laugh from a still frame she didn't know was captured. Is that me? Beatrice squints. Amber nods proudly. Yep. I've been quietly clipping the stories you've told me over the past few weeks. Nothing staged. Just raw, beautiful you. You're incredible, Grandma. People are going to love this. Beatrice stiffens. Amber, you never asked. I didn't think I had to. Amber's voice softens. It's just stories, Grandma. Nothing personal. And I kept the private stuff out. Promise. The cursor hovers over the first video, the woman who almost derailed Apollo 19, but saved it instead. 3.4K views. Beatrice presses her fingers together. I wasn't even on Apollo 19. Amber shrugs. Details. You were in the room. There's a moment, quiet and long, where the sound of rain tapping the windows fills the space between them. Beatrice leans forward, watching herself on screen, her voice slightly cracked, her hands gesturing. There's even music. Swelling strings, soft piano, a tone of tragedy and triumph. It's beautiful, but it's not hers. I sound like a eulogy, Beatrice mutters. Amber grins. You sound epic. Beatrice rises from the table, stepping away from the screen. Why do you want this, Amber? The young woman falters. Because I don't want you to disappear. Beatrice turns back to her, confused. Amber swallows. You're the last person in this family who actually stood for something. I mean real stuff. Not grades, not internships, but history. Genius. And the way the world's going, I need something solid, something pure. Her voice cracks for the first time. I need you to matter, to them, not just to me. Beatrice breathes slowly. In, out. It's hard to be angry with someone who means well. Harder still to recognize when love is dressed up like strategy. The line between preservation and exploitation is thinner than people think, especially in the age of streaming. She reaches for Amber's hand. Amber, I love you. And I'm glad you're proud. But if you're going to use my story, ask me which parts are true. Amber nods, eyes glassy. Of course, I promise. She doesn't mean to lie, not yet. As the clock ticks past midnight, Beatrice returns to her room. She doesn't close the door. The faint sound of Amber clicking away on her laptop drifts through the hallway. Outside, the rain falls harder now, relentless. Beatrice opens a drawer, pulling out a thin folder, yellowed newspaper clippings, old letters from NASA, and a small photo of herself in 1976, helmet tucked under one arm, standing beside a launch pad, all fire and certainty. She sits on the edge of her bed, holding the picture close. They used to call me a genius, she whispers again to no one. And as the lights dim, the camera lingers on her face, not defeated, not even sad, just suspended. Like a star still burning in a part of the sky no one looks at anymore. It happened by accident. The kind that doesn't just rattle your world, it redefines it. Beatrice had never cared much for social media. To her, the internet was a strange, slippery place where truth was blurred with performance and reality was compressed into bite-sized delusions. But that morning, as the kettle hissed and Amber slept through her alarms again, Beatrice sat in the living room, scrolling through Amber's open tablet, not snooping, just passing time. She tapped an icon by mistake. The screen brightened with a video titled "The Loneliest Grandmother in America," a soft-focused thumbnail of an elderly woman in a knitted shawl weeping at a kitchen table. The caption read, "She gave her life to science. Now she eats dinner alone every night." Underneath the hashtags, donate for Nana, inspire her again, lonely but strong. Beatrice blinked. The woman on screen wasn't her. The lines on the actress's face were painted deeper, sadder. Her hands trembled as she spooned soup into her mouth. Off camera, a voice, unmistakably Amber's, gently coaxed. "Tell them about the time you almost got evicted, Nana." The woman whimpered. "I just wanted someone to talk to, but they forgot me." The video ended with a haunting piano chord and a link to a donation page. Beatrice stared at the tablet for a full minute, heartbeat accelerating like a launch countdown. She went back, scanned the channel. There were more. Nana's final Christmas, she designed space shuttles. Now she can't afford groceries. This genius grandmother only wants a hug. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, people writing things like, "This broke me. Where can I send money? She's a hero. Amber is such an angel for taking care of her." Beatrice's fingers trembled, not from age, but fury, not confusion, but clarity. She exited the app and dug deeper. Email, payment portals, draft scripts. Her engineering brain took over, parsing patterns, timestamps, transaction IDs. She found an entire digital infrastructure, a funnel from clickbait videos to merchandise to Patreon perks, like letters from Nana, all ghost-written. The biggest shock was the GoFundMe page, over $83,000 raised in less than 6 months, for Beatrice, or rather a myth that wore her name like a mask. Footsteps creaked behind her. Beatrice closed the app just as Amber stumbled into the room, eyes still sticky with sleep, oversized hoodie slipping off one shoulder. "Morning, Grandma," she chirped, yawning. "What you up to?" Beatrice looked at her long and quiet. Her gaze didn't accuse, not yet. It studied, calculated. She'd spent a lifetime decoding telemetry data and facial micro-expressions in astronauts on the verge of panic. She recognized the subtle twitch in Amber's jaw, the downward glance. She was hiding something. "Just catching up," Beatrice replied evenly, handing her the tablet. "You left this unlocked." Amber took it quickly, too quickly. "Oh, sorry." Silence stretched between them like a fraying cable. Later that afternoon, Beatrice waited until Amber was in the shower. She walked into her room not to violate privacy, but to reclaim the truth. The room smelled like vanilla candles and desperation. On the desk, vision boards, sponsorship pitch decks, flowcharts, mapping out follower engagement. Pinned to the wall, written in bubble letters, Goal 1M, subs, by graduation. Next to it, a sketch of Beatrice's face, stylized, softened, weaponized. Beatrice opened a folder labeled Brand Narrative, Inside Scripts. One read, "Nana cries while peeling potatoes," says, "If only I had a visitor," cut to black. Link to donation. There were casting notes, headshots of elderly actresses. One even looked eerily similar to Beatrice, just slightly frailer, more photogenic in a pitying sort of way. She backed out of the room quietly, the folder burned into her mind. That evening over dinner, Beatrice stirred her soup slowly. Amber sat across the table, scrolling through her phone. "Amber," she said gently, "I saw one of your videos today." Amber froze. "Oh." Beatrice sipped her soup. The one with the weeping grandmother. The shawl was a nice touch. Amber's eyes flickered, then steadied. "Oh, that. It was just, concept content. Symbolic. Symbolic of who Beatrice asked calmly." Amber set her phone down. "Come on, Grandma. You're not mad, are you? It's not like I said it was you. It's just a vibe, a story. You used my name." Amber leaned back, arms crossed. "It's not exactly your name. It's a character based on you. It's not personal." Beatrice held her gaze unblinking. "You told the internet I was starving. Alone. Abandoned." Amber scoffed. "It's metaphorical, Grandma. People respond to emotion. They want to feel something. That's how the algorithm works." Beatrice set her spoon down, fingers trembling slightly now. "And the donations?" Amber hesitated. "They go to production, to amplify the message. The message is the important part. You manufactured sympathy," Beatrice said coldly. "You commodified loneliness." Amber laughed, not cruelly, but defensively, like someone who's just been caught with their hand in a cookie jar and can't believe the rules still apply to them. "You're overreacting. It's not like I'm hurting anyone. People feel good donating. You're helping them feel good. It's a win-win." Beatrice's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not a story if the person it's about didn't choose to tell it." Amber stood up, eyes flashing. "You're being dramatic. It's just content. People love it. They love you." "They don't love me," Beatrice said. "They love the version of me you fabricated. The broken old woman crying in the dark." Amber shrugged, walking toward the sink. "So what? At least people are paying attention." Beatrice stared at her granddaughter, and for the first time she didn't see the child she raised after her daughter's overdose. She didn't see the bright, ambitious young woman she'd once bragged about to her NASA colleagues. She saw something else now, something colder, a strategist, a manipulator with a ring light and a moral compass spun off its axis. "You know," Beatrice murmured, "I used to think you were the best part of my legacy." Amber didn't turn around, and now Beatrice stood. Her voice was clear, calm, without edge. "Now I wonder if you ever knew who I was at all." She walked out of the kitchen, leaving her half-eaten soup behind. Upstairs, Beatrice closed her bedroom door, then pulled out the same leather-bound notebook. But tonight she didn't write groceries. She wrote names, dates, file paths, audio timestamps, a list of everything she would need if she decided to do what she had done 1,000 times before in her career: investigate, verify, and dismantle a system built on lies. Outside, the Seattle rain fell harder. Inside, a woman who once calculated escape velocities now began calculating something else: truth precisions and exit strategies. The internet vanished. It started with a polite lie. "The Wi-Fi must be acting up," Amber said one morning, peering over the kitchen island. "I think it's a Comcast thing." Beatrice had woken early as usual, tea in hand, her tablet open to a bookmarked page from NASA's public archive. She liked to check the daily telemetry logs, not because they mattered anymore, but because the numbers calmed her. The language of space vectors, velocity-mass ratios, had always made more sense to her than people ever did, but the page wouldn't load. Nor would her email. Amber came into the room in socks and fake concern. "Do you need it for something urgent?" she asked. "No," Beatrice said. "Just my morning routine." Amber smiled, brushing it off. "You really should be spending less time staring at screens, especially at your age." The way she said it, "at your age," landed with a different weight than usual. Not playful, not affectionate, measured, like a needle slipped under the skin. By noon, Beatrice's phone had no signal. By evening, her old laptop refused to boot, batteries finally dead. Amber chirped. And the next morning, the house printer was gone. "I didn't throw it out," Amber explained. "Just moved it to the garage. It's dusty and ancient. I'll bring it back if you really need it." Beatrice nodded, silent. She didn't argue. Not yet. She knew enough about containment to recognize the early stages not of breakdown, but of control. Then came the surveillance. Amber started knocking on her door more frequently. "Grandma, are you okay in there? Hey, you've been in your room a while. Need anything? You should nap more. The doctor said stress is dangerous for the elderly." Beatrice wasn't sick. Her blood pressure was fine, her memory sharp. But Amber had started looking at her the way people look at cracked glass, intact, but only barely. One afternoon, Beatrice reached for her notebook only to find it missing. She searched quietly. First her desk, then her shelves, the living room, the kitchen drawers. Gone. She didn't ask Amber. She didn't need to. She knew. That night over dinner, Amber brought it up like a TV plot twist. "So," she said, stirring her noodles, "Dr. Lamb called." Beatrice looked up. "Who?" "My therapist. Remember the one I told you about?" Beatrice nodded slowly. "Yes. You said he had a thing for mindfulness." Amber's tone was casual, too casual. "He said I should watch out for certain signs. You know, in older relatives. Paranoia, fixation, confusion. He says those can be early signs of cognitive decline." Beatrice put her fork down. "Are you suggesting I'm senile?" Amber smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course not. I'm just saying sometimes when people get older, they imagine things, or they misinterpret situations, and it might be good to get ahead of that, just in case." Beatrice felt the air tighten around her. "Ahead of what?" Amber leaned forward, voice dropping an octave. "Grandma, you've been acting erratic. You're suspicious, forgetful. You've accused me of lying over videos, for God's sake. I'm worried." "Worried enough to what?" Beatrice asked. Amber didn't blink. "If this escalates, I might have to involve a conservator, just to make sure you're safe. And stable." Beatrice stared at her. "You mean an elder care attorney?" Amber nodded. "Or a caseworker. Depends." The silence that followed wasn't dead. It was screaming. Beatrice pushed back her chair, stood slowly. Every muscle in her body remembered gravity, remembered what it meant to be dismissed, diminished, disqualified. She'd seen it in boardrooms, heard it in committee rooms, but never at her own dinner table. That night she searched the attic. She found it buried in a cardboard box beneath old VHS tapes and dusty blankets, a Sony ICD UX80 voice recorder. Black, still functional. One battery left inside. The screen lit up weakly. She held it like a relic or a weapon. Over the next few days, Beatrice became a student of silence. She tucked the recorder inside her cardigan pocket, always set to REC. She kept her voice steady, even when Amber cornered her in the hallway with passive-aggressive kindness. "Did you already take your pills, Grandma? You seem off." Click. "I think you might have imagined that argument. You've been sleeping less." Click. If you're not feeling safe, I can schedule a visit from someone who understands mental health decline. Click. Every sentence was documented, every threat sealed in binary. Beatrice didn't yell. She didn't confront. She built a case. The way she used to build telemetry profiles, patiently, precisely, one signal at a time. Amber seemed oblivious, though sometimes she'd pause mid-sentence, eyes narrowing. "You've been really quiet lately," she noted, once studying Beatrice over breakfast. "Listening is underrated," Beatrice replied. Amber laughed. "Or maybe your hearing's going." Beatrice smiled. Maybe. There were other changes. The house locks were suddenly glitchy. Amber claimed the keypad was outdated, but Beatrice couldn't open the front door without her now. Her mail came pre-sorted. Even the old landline vanished. Beatrice realized she was being managed, like an asset, like an inconvenience. And more than that, she was being erased. One night she watched from the staircase as Amber filmed a new clip on the couch. This time the actress playing Grandma wore the same cardigan Beatrice had lost 2 weeks ago. She clutched a framed photo of a man who wasn't Beatrice's husband and whispered into the lens. "I talk to his picture every night. I just want to hear his voice again." Soft music played underneath. Amber adjusted the lighting, then whispered, "Cut. Perfect." Beatrice retreated back upstairs before she could be seen. In her room, she pressed stop on the recorder, labeled the file Fabrication Sequence 3.wave. She sat on her bed for a long time, eyes open, staring into the dark. The betrayal no longer felt sharp, it felt systemic. This wasn't just manipulation, this was captivity, digital, emotional, logistical, a silent hostage situation. But Beatrice Monroe didn't panic. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She'd spent decades building fail-safes, contingency plans, ejection protocols. And now she would begin again, not with wires or algorithms, but with truth, whispered, recorded, archived, proof against a world where performance had become more valuable than people. She picked up the recorder, pressed record again, and said, "Entry 12. Subject displays signs of coercive control. Objective remains unchanged. Protect reality from narrative." Click. It was the kind of morning that begged to be forgotten. Gray skies, damp wind, a silence that clung to the walls like mildew. The house was still too still. Amber had left early for class or a shoot, or maybe just to keep up the illusion of a normal schedule. Beatrice didn't ask anymore. There were no conversations now, only curated exchanges wrapped in sugar and suspicion. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the world go about its business without her. A jogger, a man walking a beagle, a mother herding twin boys in raincoats. And her, she was background noise in her own life. Except she wasn't, not today. The old voice recorder was tucked into her coat pocket. 3 dozen entries already: threats, manipulation, fake medical concerns, quiet, coercion. She'd labeled them all like specimens, but the recordings alone weren't enough. If she died tomorrow, they'd vanish with her. What she needed was a signal flare, something louder than Amber's curated lies, something that would reach beyond the curated echo chamber of Inspire Nana. She needed a voice louder than hers, or rather someone to hand her voice to. She didn't call anyone, no phone, no texts, no leaving a digital trail. She walked. Beatrice took the long route, 2 buses and 4 blocks, until she reached the Fremont Public Library, a modest ivy-covered building tucked between an artisan cheese shop and a tattoo parlor. It smelled like forgotten stories and stubborn rebellion. She walked past the front desk and sat down at a row of community computers. She slid on a pair of disposable gloves before touching the keyboard. Some habits die hard. She opened a blank email and typed, "To Red Lantern Tips at protonmail.com. Subject urgent. Elder exploitation media fraud. Seattle." Her message was short, terse, direct. She gave no name, only a line that read, "I am the real Beatrice Monroe. The one you've seen isn't me. I can prove it. She attached one audio clip, just one, the cleanest one. Amber saying, "If you don't cooperate, I'll have you declared mentally unfit." Before hitting send, she hesitated. Her fingers hovered. She was about to declare war. Not on Amber alone, but on the version of herself that had been stolen, rebranded, weaponized. And when you start a war at 70, there's no promise of winning. only the promise that it will cost something. Beatrice clicked send. That night, the reply came fast. A simple subject line, "We believe you. Let's talk." The signature was minimal Red Lantern Investigations, independent podcast journalism. Truth doesn't trend, it burns. They offered to record a remote interview, anonymous, encrypted, masked voice. She agreed. An audio call, no video, no names, just her words. She waited until 3:00 a.m. to call. Amber was snoring in the next room, earbuds in, lost in her own false world. Beatrice sat at her desk, the recorder plugged into her laptop mic tucked under her scarf. The voice on the other end was warm but cautious. "This is Mina," it said. "Just so you know, we take our sources seriously. This line isn't traceable, and we don't publish anything without consent." Beatrice cleared her throat. "I'm not here for exposure. I'm here because someone took my name and turned it into a lie." "Take your time," Mina said. Beatrice began slowly. Her voice trembled at first, but not from fear, from restraint. It had been so long since someone listened without interruption, without editing her into something else. She told them everything, how Amber had taken her stories, twisted them, hired actresses, faked her voice, weaponized grief for clicks. She described the isolation, the gaslighting, the subtle but persistent erosion of her autonomy. "I'm not crazy," she said. "I've designed engines that operate in zero gravity. I've saved astronauts from suffocating in vacuum, and now I'm apparently too fragile to manage a router." Mina didn't laugh. She just whispered, "We hear you." Beatrice leaned closer to the mic. Her tone dropped surgical and final. "I don't need pity. I don't want revenge. I just want the truth back in my hands. If you can help me do that, I'll give you everything I've got." And she did. Every recording, every file, every screenshot she could access. She emailed them from a flash drive she'd buried beneath the azaleas in her garden just to avoid suspicion. She'd prepped for this like she prepped every NASA launch meticulously. The call ended with a promise. "You'll hear from us soon." 3 days later, the first podcast episode dropped, The Real Grandmother Speaks. It didn't open with dramatic music or voiceovers. It opened with silence. Then Beatrice's voice. "My name is Beatrice Monroe. Or at least that's who I was. You've seen me online. Except you haven't. The woman you cried for, that's not me, that's fiction. And I'm done being erased." The episode ran 17 minutes. Clips of Amber's gaslighting. Interviews with experts on elder manipulation and digital exploitation. An ethics professor comparing emotional fraud to identity theft. It hit 40,000 listens in 2 hours. Beatrice didn't tell Amber. She waited. Amber found out at dinner. The moment was almost too quiet. Amber scrolled her phone with one hand while stabbing at tofu with the other. Then suddenly she froze, eyes locked on the screen, jaw slackened. The screen on her phone displayed a trending Twitter hashtag, #TheRealBeatrice. Next to it, a clip of her own voice saying, "If this escalates, I'll get you declared mentally unfit." Amber's face drained of color. She looked up. "You," she whispered. Beatrice didn't flinch, didn't smile. She lifted her glass of water, calmly took a sip, and met her granddaughter's eyes. Amber's voice shook. "What the hell did you do?" Beatrice's reply was steady. "I told the truth." Amber stood abruptly, chair screeching behind her. "You think anyone's going to believe some senile old—" Beatrice cut her off. "Don't." The word landed like a gavel. "I may be old," Beatrice said, rising slowly, "but I'm not broken, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." Amber stared, panicked, breath hitching. Beatrice stepped past her, heading for the hallway. As she passed, she added almost gently, "Your version of me was profitable, but mine, it's just beginning." She walked upstairs without looking back. In her room, she opened her laptop, watched the download ticker climb on the second podcast episode already queued. Outside, the rain had started again, but this time it felt different, cleansing, not drowning. Downstairs, Amber paced, phone in hand, scrambling to control the narrative. But it was too late. The truth had a voice now, and it was louder than fiction. It happened faster than anyone expected. The podcast didn't just trend, it ignited. Within 24 hours, The Real Grandmother Speaks was shared by 2 former senators, one beloved Hollywood actor and a librarian from Wisconsin who added the comment, "My Nana used to say truth has bad posture, but it always stands up in the end." Beatrice Monroe, whose name until a few days ago had floated like dust in the corners of academia and aerospace history, was suddenly known. Not as a victim, not as a tragic emblem, but as a woman who had calmly, clearly, and unapologetically pulled the curtain down. The world listened. TikTokers created dramatic reenactments. Twitter flooded with the hashtag #TheRealBeatrice. Reddit threads analyzed Amber's scripts like criminal exhibits. BuzzFeed ran a listicle titled 9 Reasons Why Beatrice Monroe is the Erin Brockovich of Our Grandparents. Somewhere in Nebraska, a girl wrote, "My grandfather cried listening to her voice. He said he's never told us how much he hates being ignored." A veteran in Maine posted, "My nursing home sold our stories to a church newsletter without asking. I thought that was normal. I see now it wasn't." A ripple became a wave. Beatrice didn't respond. She didn't post. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't even update her voicemail. She let the audio speak for itself. Instead, she watered her garden. She had always believed in delayed combustion, that truth, like rocket fuel, doesn't explode immediately. It heats, builds, and when it lifts, it burns everything false beneath it. Amber was the first to feel the heat. On the following Tuesday, the University of Washington's Department of Communication summoned her for a mandatory review. She showed up in a blazer 2 sizes too large, hair tied in a rushed bun, the under eyes of someone who hadn't slept in days. Waiting for her inside the conference room were 2 professors, 1 legal advisor, and Dean Carruthers, a man who rarely raised his voice but never needed to. Amber sat down with the casual confidence of someone who still believed she could explain her way out of anything. They didn't let her speak first. "We've reviewed the podcast, the associated media content, and a complaint filed by a journalism ethics coalition," Dean Carruthers began. Amber blinked. "Ethics, seriously?" The legal advisor folded her hands. "Amber, the issue here isn't just misrepresentation. It's the potential defrauding of public funds under a fabricated identity. There are questions of exploitation, impersonation, and emotional harm." Amber's jaw clenched. "You don't understand how content works." Professor Rowe leaned in. "Then explain it." Amber's voice sharpened. "People don't care about truth unless it hurts. They don't watch old people tell stories unless those stories are tragic. If I made Grandma talk about orbital mechanics, nobody would give a damn." Her voice rose. "But if I show a crying woman in a shawl saying, 'I miss my husband,' suddenly it matters. Suddenly people pay attention. I didn't lie, I shaped a message. I made her visible." Dean Carruthers didn't flinch. "You didn't make her visible. You erased her and projected a character onto her body. That's not journalism, that's fraud." Amber shot to her feet, eyes wild. "You want to know why this worked? Because nobody gives a damn about old people unless they're suffering, unless they're begging for your attention. You made us this way. I just filmed it." For a long moment no one spoke. Then quietly Professor Rowe said, "So what exactly do you think your grandmother was doing when she spoke the truth?" "Performing." Amber opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. They dismissed her with a note suspension pending review. She left the building walking faster than necessary, fists clenched, heart pounding in her ears. Meanwhile, Beatrice sat on her porch listening to birdsong. A delivery boy walked up with a box of digital voice recorder shipped express. "Thank you," Beatrice said, signing quietly. He stared at her for a moment. "Are you the Beatrice from the podcast?" Beatrice smiled gently. "Depends. Are you asking as a fan or a fact-checker?" He laughed, a little embarrassed. "Just thank you for speaking. My mom sent the link to everyone in our family chat. We all cried." Beatrice nodded. "Then don't forget why." He left and she placed the new recorder on the table beside her. She wasn't done. Not yet. Inside the house, Amber was doom-scrolling. Every refresh brought a new headline, a new stitch of her voice over Beatrice's quiet revelations. She couldn't stop it. She couldn't spin it. Even her supporters had gone silent. Some flipped, others deleted. Amber began writing a statement. "I never intended harm. My grandmother and I had creative differences. I deeply regret any pain caused." She deleted it. Beatrice watched her from the hallway unseen. She felt no glee, no vengeance. Only clarity. The kind that hardens like steel inside the ribs. She thought of all the women who'd gone unheard, all the elders who'd been rewritten, cropped out, or subtitled into caricature. She whispered to herself, truth carries weight, even when no one's holding it up. Outside, her garden bloomed like it hadn't in years, and in inboxes around the country more stories began to arrive, each with the same subject line. She reminds me of someone I love. And Beatrice knew the fire she lit wasn't just for herself. It was a torch passed. It happened just before sunset. There's something about golden light that makes lies harder to hold together. It seeps through windows, washes over faces, exposes hairline cracks in carefully constructed facades. The house, once humming with denial, now sat in silence. A quiet not of peace, but pressure. Beatrice was at her desk cataloging recordings. She worked in silence, fingers slow but steady, labeling each file by date and category. Emotional coercion, financial manipulation threat, escalation. The methodical process calmed her, reminded her of mission control in Houston, of checklists and pressure readings, of the difference between a system's error and sabotage. She inserted a micro SD card into her backup drive, a second copy, unplugged from the internet. She wasn't taking chances. Down the hall, Amber's bedroom door slammed open. Footsteps thundered. Too fast, too loud. Amber burst into the room like a storm, eyes bloodshot, lips pressed into a trembling line. In her hand, one of the recorders. Beatrice had left it by the kitchen window where she sometimes caught natural sound. "You've been recording me." Amber's voice cracked into a scream. "You've been recording me this whole time." Beatrice didn't stand. Not yet. She looked at her granddaughter with the weariness of someone who had predicted this moment and had simply been waiting for it to arrive. Amber marched forward, the recorder shaking in her hand. "Is this what you do now? You spy on your own family. You leak our conversations to strangers." Beatrice stood now slowly, spine straight. "Our conversations stopped being private the day you sold my identity for pity clicks." Amber's face contorted. She threw the recorder to the floor. The plastic casing shattered like glass, scattering black shards across the hardwood. "I trusted you," Amber screamed. "I defended you." "You used me," Beatrice said, steady as gravity. Amber was breathing hard, fists clenched. "You could have come to me. You could have told me you were upset. But no, you go to the internet, to podcast people, strangers. You picked them over your own blood." Beatrice took a step forward. "I picked the truth, because blood doesn't give you the right to bury someone alive." Amber laughed, bitter and raw. "You're just old and bitter. You can't stand that people still listen to me, that I made you matter." Beatrice looked her dead in the eye. "I mattered before you were born, and I'll matter after your lies collapse." Amber took another step, rage trembling through her. "I made you a symbol. I gave you a platform." "You gave me a cage," Beatrice said. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Amber's voice dropped cold and flat. "I swear to God, I'll make sure nobody ever listens to you again." And just like that, she turned, grabbed her keys, stormed toward the door. "Don't bother waiting up," she spat. "I'm done playing the villain in your sad little redemption story." The door slammed. Tires squealed on wet asphalt. Beatrice stood alone in the silence, the smell of rage still hanging in the room. She didn't cry. She didn't sigh. She knelt down, gathering the shattered remains of the recorder, broken circuits, crushed plastic. Then she reached for the drawer, opened it. Inside, a second recorder, intact. And beside it, 2 micro SD cards, both labeled, both duplicated. She stared at the broken one in her hand and whispered, "You always bring a backup to space." Later that night, she swept the floors clean. She washed the dishes. She sat at the kitchen table with her tea eyes scanning the dark outside the window. She didn't sleep. At 2:08 a.m., her email pinged. The sender, Cara Lenz. Investigative features, The Chronicle. The subject line, "Your voice. Unedited. Interested." The message was short but direct. "Ms. Monroe, I've followed the podcast. I've listened to every second. I believe in letting truth speak for itself. If you're open to it, I'd like to interview you. Long form, unfiltered, wherever you choose. No lights, no cuts, just the truth. Respectfully, Cara." Beatrice stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. She didn't reply right away. She just closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair, eyes half closed. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, a woman who had once rescued astronauts from orbit now reached for something heavier, the dignity of being heard without manipulation. She looked at the blank recorder on the table, then at the note she had scribbled earlier that night. One word: museum. She picked up a pen, circled it, then finally whispered into the dark. Let them meet the woman, not the myth. They filmed it in silence. No music, no lights, no makeup crew or publicist hovering nearby. Just a single camera, one mic, and the quiet hum of the Bautangkitut, Hangkongte Museum of Flight after hours. The public had gone home. The kids had stopped pressing their hands to the glass. Only the ghosts of innovation remained, and Beatrice Monroe standing still beneath the belly of the Mercury capsule she had helped stabilize in the early 80s. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back simply. Her voice, that hadn't changed, measured, meticulous, and now filled with a kind of restrained fury polished by decades of being overlooked. Cara Lenz, the journalist from the Chronicle, didn't interrupt. She sat behind the camera, letting it roll. This wasn't a profile piece, it was a reckoning. Beatrice started slow. I was 29 when they put me in the same room as 8 men who thought I was there to fetch coffee. She looked directly into the lens. I wasn't. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. She didn't fidget. She didn't smile for effect. Her words had their own gravity. I designed adaptive redundancy logic for short-range orbital systems. I calculated fuel variance on descent thrusters when the lead engineer blacked out from stress. I wrote emergency subroutines for the Apollo 20 test sequence on a yellow legal pad in pencil. She held her gaze steady. And you know what people remember? That I wore a green skirt to the press photo. Beatrice took a breath. I didn't need to be famous. I didn't want to be viral. I just wanted to be accurate. Her fingers tapped the arm of her chair once. A single soft click. But then came the lies. Not from enemies, from family. She didn't name Amber. She didn't have to. They made me into a meme. A crying grandma. A soft, lonely thing with shaking hands and no dignity. And the worst part, people loved it. They loved the sadness. They ate it up because it made them feel good about giving $10. She leaned forward slightly, tone sharpening like a scalpel. But I'm not your symbol. I'm not your guilt trip. I'm not a prompt for your next wellness campaign. Her voice didn't rise, but the air around her changed. I'm a scientist. I'm a builder. I'm a survivor. She paused, then delivered the line that would echo across feeds, newsrooms, and dinner tables for days to come. Old doesn't mean silent. I'm not a symbol. I'm a person. 3 seconds of silence. A small exhale. Then she added softer. Start acting like we matter before we die, not after. The recording cut there. By the time the video was posted, it was past midnight. Cara uploaded it raw, no edits, no transitions on every platform available. It was titled, Unscripted Beatrice Monroe Unfiltered. It hit 1 million views in 12 hours. The reactions came like a storm. Comments pouring in from caregivers, nurses, grandkids, engineers, aging women who had been muted in conference rooms, and young people who finally saw age as something other than decline. One tweet read, "She's not your grandma, she's your warning." Another, "Just called my grandfather to ask about his work. I'd never asked." He cried. Facebook groups renamed themselves Beatrice's Circle. Reddit created a megathread titled Let Elders Speak, inspired by Monroe, the podcast that started it all. The Real Grandmother Speaks shot to the #1 spot on Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, displacing crime shows and celebrity gossip. And then something else happened, something Beatrice hadn't predicted. Action. Within a week, the American Coalition for Elder Justice launched an emergency petition for digital protections against image-based elder exploitation. Congressional aides requested copies of the podcast transcript. Nonprofits that had quietly struggled for years suddenly found themselves overwhelmed with volunteers. Beatrice's words were quoted in newspapers, reposted in newsletters, printed on T-shirts. Old doesn't mean silent. And in the middle of all this, Beatrice sat alone on her porch, sipping cold tea, watching the rain tap the same window she had once felt trapped behind. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt seen. Inside her inbox was overflowing with media requests, network interviews, award nominations, TEDx invitations. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened one email from a woman named Judith in Ohio. "I never told anyone what my son did to me, but I listened to you, and I told my daughter. For the first time in a decade, I think I'll sleep tonight. Thank you for being real." Beatrice read it twice, then again, then closed her laptop. She looked up at the stars. Some of them she had helped name, but tonight she wasn't looking for constellations. She was listening to the echo, the sound of truth finally loud enough to be heard. Amber's fall wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was silent, the kind of quiet that creeps in when the last notification finally stops buzzing. 3 weeks after the podcast went viral, Amber Monroe disappeared from the internet. Her YouTube channel was flagged, demonetized, then locked. Sponsors pulled out in coordinated silence, not even bothering with an email. Her Patreon subscribers dropped from 11,284 to less than 400 in a single night. Half were bots, the rest were pity. The campus, once a place where she floated through hallways with earbuds in and a latte in hand, became hostile terrain. Classmates didn't yell, they stared. Professors asked for extensions on assignments she hadn't turned in. One even asked if she needed to take a leave of absence. The sting was in how gently they said it, as if she were terminal. The final blow came when the university froze her thesis project, the subject line of the email pending review for ethical violation. Amber didn't read it twice. She closed her laptop, pushed it aside, and curled up on the couch in her off-campus apartment, one she no longer knew how to afford. No one had texted in days, no calls, not even hate. She was beneath the radar now, below even the bottom of the feed. And that was the thing no one tells you about falling from grace. You don't hit the ground. You just float endlessly in a vacuum where no one's looking. At 11:43 p.m., she picked up her phone. She scrolled past old group chats filled with jokes and emojis, now ghost towns, past a DM from an influencer who had once said, "Girl, your content is fire," past a message thread labeled Grandma. Her thumb hesitated, then tapped. She didn't know what to say at first. Just held the phone to her ear, listening to the long, brutal sound of it ringing. Then a soft click. The line opened. Silence. No voice. Just breath. Amber inhaled shakily, then spoke. "Grandma." No answer. Still breath, still there. Amber pressed the heels of her palms to her eyes. "I don't have anyone else to call." Her voice cracked. "I lost everything. I know I deserve it. I know. But I don't know where to start. I don't even know how to be a person when nobody's watching me anymore." Still no response, but the line didn't go dead. "I'm sorry for everything, not just the videos, for turning you into something I could profit from, for using your stories, for making it about me. I think I was scared that if I didn't make meaning, I wouldn't have any." Her words became softer, more desperate. "I didn't want to be forgotten. I just didn't want to be nothing." The silence after that was longer. Amber waited. 1 second, 2. She thought maybe Beatrice had fallen asleep, or maybe hung up without her noticing. But then she heard it, one breath. Deep, controlled, a presence. "Still there?" Amber sniffled. "I know you're mad. You should be. But I just wanted you to know that I hear it now. All of it. Everything you were trying to say." The call disconnected. Amber stared at the screen, eyes wet, chest hollow. Not because she was rejected, but because she had been heard, and that was enough to split her wide open. Meanwhile, across the city, Beatrice sat at her desk, the old rotary phone beside her still humming softly. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just sat in the dark, eyes open, mind racing, not with anger, but memory. Amber's voice as a child. Her first science fair. The time she glued aluminum foil to her tricycle, called it a rocket. Beatrice closed her eyes for a moment. The ache wasn't fresh. It was fossilized, but it pulsed now, exposed. She turned back to her desk. A letter was sitting there, opened but unanswered. The header read, "The American Council on Scientific Integrity and Aging." The invitation was simple. "Ms. Monroe, we would be honored if you would keynote our upcoming symposium on aging with dignity in the age of digital storytelling. You would not be speaking as a victim. You would be speaking as a scientist and as a survivor." Beatrice had stared at that line for hours earlier in the week. Survivor. She hated the word. It made it sound like you barely crawled out of something. She wasn't crawling. She had walked through the fire and documented it frame by frame. That was something else entirely. She took a pen and wrote 2 words on the bottom of the letter, "I accept." Then she leaned back in her chair, the city lights flickering outside her window like distant stars, each one a witness to the quiet resilience of a woman who refused to be erased. Amber lay on her couch phone, still clutched in her hand, eyes wide open. Not waiting, just listening. The silence was full now, full of consequence, full of her own voice finally running out of places to hide. It was a Sunday, pale and windless, the kind of day where even the birds seemed to hesitate. Beatrice had just returned from a planning meeting for the symposium. Her coat damp with mist, her fingers aching from the morning chill. She liked that kind of ache. It reminded her that her body still spoke to her, still registered weather and time and motion. She'd made it home with a handful of folders, the final draft of her speech, and a letter from the Smithsonian about a planned exhibit, Women of Flight, the Hidden Engineers. She placed everything neatly on the dining room table, boiled water for tea, and sat down content to spend the afternoon in quiet. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just 2 slow, deliberate taps, the kind that didn't demand entry, only the right to exist on the other side of the door. Beatrice knew who it was before she opened it. Amber stood there drenched, not from rain, it hadn't rained in days, but from something heavier, regret, defeat. She held nothing in her hands, no flowers, no script, no phone, just her. "Hi, Amber," said her voice, almost apologizing for existing. "Can I come in?" Beatrice stepped aside. They moved to the kitchen without speaking. The air was different now, not like before when tension buzzed like static under every word. This was quieter, like grief after a funeral, not rage, not pleading, just aftermath. Amber sat arms folded in front of her like a child waiting for reprimand. I don't want to waste your time," she began, "and I know I don't have a right to ask you for anything. I needed to say it out loud, face to face." Beatrice didn't answer. She stirred her tea slowly. Amber kept going, voice thin and honest, in a way Beatrice hadn't heard in years. "I was wrong. All of it. Not just what I did to you, but the way I built my life on lies. The way I used your legacy as a prop because I didn't believe I had one of my own. And then, when you called me out, I was so angry, but it wasn't at you. It was because you saw me. You saw through me." A pause. "I've never been seen like that before." Beatrice looked at her eyes steady. She said nothing. Amber's voice cracked. "I don't want anything from you. I don't want your money or your house or your forgiveness if you're not ready. I just want to live differently. I want to be real. I don't even know what that means yet. But I know it starts here." She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a small folded sheet of paper, and placed it on the table. It was a printed page, simple, stark. "Application Volunteer Care Assistant, Elder Care Alliance of King County." "I've already started the background check process," Amber said, her eyes lowering. "I want to learn how to serve people I used to manipulate." The room held that quiet again. Beatrice took a breath, not deep, just enough. She studied her granddaughter's face, not the shell she had known, but the raw shape underneath. No mascara, no concealer, no performance. Just the girl who used to sneak into her lab and ask if stars ever got tired. "I'm not angry," Beatrice finally said. Amber flinched. "You're not—" "No," Beatrice said. "Anger is for people who expect better. I stopped expecting from you a long time ago." Amber nodded slowly, her eyes wet. She didn't reach for a tissue. She didn't apologize again. She just sat there, letting the weight of those words settle. Beatrice stood up, walked to the credenza, and returned with a sealed envelope. The paper was thick, the seal unbroken. She placed it gently in front of Amber. "This is a release of financial ties," Beatrice said calmly. "No inheritance, no joint assets, no shared responsibilities. As of today, we are no longer legally, financially, or emotionally entangled." Amber didn't touch the envelope. "I'm not punishing you," Beatrice continued, "but I am releasing myself from the role of grandmother, guardian, safety net. You asked how to start over. This is it. Not with my name, not with my money, but with your choices." Amber stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. Her shoulders shook, but she didn't speak. Beatrice sat back down, folded her hands. I hope you make something of yourself. I do. But I won't be watching. Amber finally reached for the envelope. She held it like it might disappear, then laid it in her lap. Thank you, she whispered. I know that's not the right word, but it's all I have. Beatrice nodded once. I know. Amber stood eyes locked with Beatrice's for a moment longer. Then she turned. No dramatic exit, no backward glance, just the soft sound of her steps moving down the hallway and out the front door. Beatrice sat for a while after that. The clock ticked quietly on the wall. Outside, the wind had picked up. Inside, the tea had gone cold, but she drank it anyway. The sky over Seattle had that soft watercolor fade. Only spring could paint muted purples bleeding into silver, the city humming below with a patience it hadn't known in decades. Beatrice Monroe sat in a circle of 5 others, each in their 70s or older, each holding a microphone that was to them both foreign object and newfound power. The podcast was called Ask the Stars, Nana. It had started as a joke, an idea pitched during a senior center's intergenerational workshop where some overzealous undergrads thought they could teach the elderly about engagement. Most of the residents had rolled their eyes, except Beatrice. She'd looked at the outline segments like Myth-Busting with Grandma and Why is the Sky Blue and said, this needs less cuteness, more clarity. And so it became The Old Man Asks the Stars. The elders ask the sky. The premise was simple elders asking questions they'd always had but were never allowed to voice out loud. And in return, the world asked them questions right back. The mic was on. Beatrice leaned in. You asked if space is cold, she said. Voice calm, edged with wit. Yes, but not the way you think. Space doesn't freeze you. It robs you. It steals your heat molecule by molecule with no atmosphere to cradle your warmth. You don't shiver in space, you vanish. The others around her laughed. Beatrice smiled softly. She liked laughter now, the kind that came without irony. The episode closed with her signature. Remember, no one is too old to wonder, or too young to listen. When the podcast uploaded, letters flooded the inbox. A girl from Toronto wrote, you make science sound like poetry. A 5th grade class from Austin sent a cardboard solar system with little post-it notes. We all want to be like Ms. Beatrice when we're 70. But it wasn't just the children. College students quoted her in ethics essays. A media literacy course in Colorado built a unit around her podcast series. A viral TikTok duet mashed her quote, space doesn't freeze you, it robs you, over shots of elder isolation in nursing homes. But the story that clung, the one that spread like gospel, came from a thread on Reddit. She once designed a vent regulator that saved a crew member from suffocating when the life support system glitched. The entire module had to be rerouted in 37 seconds. They never told the press. She just got a thank you note, no bonus, no name on the mission badge. The thread ended with, now she's saving thousands of voices from disappearing. One episode at a time. Beatrice didn't know how the story leaked. Maybe a former colleague, maybe Amber. Amber. Her name hadn't been spoken in weeks, but Beatrice had kept track. Somewhere on the other side of the city, Amber worked 6 days a week at a digital media rehab center for teens who'd violated online ethics codes, deepfake bullies, micro-influencers caught in scam loops, and kids who thought virality was an identity. Amber wasn't an instructor. She wasn't allowed to teach. She was there to listen. Her job was to sit with each new case, take them through their feeds, and ask one question. Do you know the difference between who you are and who you're pretending to be? She didn't wear makeup anymore. She didn't script. She just sat. And sometimes she brought in audio from the real grandmother speaks. Not to shame, but to remind them what truth sounds like when it isn't trying to sell you anything. One afternoon, a student asked, "Is that your grandma?" Amber hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," she said. "She used to make star maps. I used to make filters. I think she's still mapping something. I'm just trying to learn how to read it." Meanwhile, Beatrice kept her pace steady. Each day, she walked the perimeter of the senior community garden, planted her hands in real soil. She laughed at a neighbor who insisted lima beans were the astronauts of vegetables. She hosted Zoom workshops on ethical storytelling. She declined invitations to speak at corporate wellness retreats. "I'm not a mascot," she'd told one politely persistent HR director. And then came the day she didn't expect. An envelope arrived. Washington Space Heritage Council. Re-honored guest invitation. Commemorative ceremony. Space Needle. Inside, a formal invitation requesting her presence at a private sunrise event. Not as decoration, but to speak. Beatrice almost declined, but something pulled her there. That morning, the city was still sleeping when she took the elevator to the top of the Space Needle. The wind whispered through the railing as she stepped forward, the horizon cracking open with light. She looked out. The Puget Sound shimmered below. The Olympic Mountains stood like quiet judges in the distance. And the capsule, her capsule, the one she had helped stabilize 4 decades ago, was mounted in glass just below her. She closed her eyes. Behind her, a camera clicked once. She didn't flinch. Then slowly her voice rose in long ting over the wind, clear and defiant. "I don't need to go back to the past. I'm still moving toward the future, just like I always have." It begins not with applause, but with echoes. A montage fades in church basements in Alabama, community halls in Minnesota, libraries in Oregon, school gymnasiums in Detroit. Everywhere, circles of folding chairs, portable speakers, and projectors illuminate the same image, a still frame of Beatrice Monroe speaking into a microphone with her eyes steady and voice undistorted. In one clip, a man in his 80s clutches a worn notebook. He clears his throat, then speaks into a microphone. "When my wife passed, I stopped talking. Nobody asked me anything that wasn't about my prescriptions or my insurance. But last week my granddaughter asked me what I built when I was young. I told her I used to design train bridges. She said she thought I'd been just retired." Laughter bittersweet. He continues. "Beatrice reminded me quiet isn't the same as emptiness." Cut to a support group in East LA. The banner reads, "Tell it in your voice, abuelita." A woman in her 70s, gold rings on every finger, sits at the head of the table telling a story in Spanglish about how she ran a kitchen that fed 200 dock workers every morning for 20 years. "I wasn't just a cook," she says, eyes gleaming. "I was logistics. I was inventory. I was operations before they had a name for it." In a college dorm room in Vermont, 2 students, one in a hoodie, the other with blue hair, sit cross-legged on a bed, recording an episode of their new podcast. This is Not Your Grandmother's Grandmother, Episode 4, Honoring the Badass Women Who Built Things While Men Were Taking Credit. Today we're talking about Beatrice Monroe and the lie of soft silence. The voice fades into the background, overtaken by the gentle swell of piano. A classroom in Manila. A retirement center in Oslo. A subway station in Tokyo where a giant LED screen plays Beatrice's now iconic quote in 5 languages. "Old doesn't mean silent. I'm not a symbol. I'm a person." Beatrice herself is not present in these rooms. And yet she is woven into conversation, embedded in essays printed on T-shirts, stitched into murals. Cut to her sitting quietly on her porch, a cup of tea in hand. The garden has grown wilder now, vines reaching across trellises, lavender bushes bending under the weight of bloom. The mail arrives in a small basket beside her. Among the bills and flyers, a handwritten envelope. She opens it slowly. Inside, a letter from a 17-year-old girl in Montana, written in purple ink with uneven loops and too many underlines. "Dear Miss Beatrice, my name is Hallie. I'm 17 and I never listened to my grandma before your story. I thought she was just old. I didn't know she used to program early telephone systems. I didn't know she had stories that didn't involve me. She told me yesterday that she used to dream about becoming a pilot. She never said that before. I don't think I ever really saw her. Thank you for not staying quiet. Hallie Masula, High Class of 2026. Beatrice reads the letter twice, then folds it gently, places it back in the envelope. She doesn't cry, she doesn't smile. She simply closes her eyes for a long moment, as if marking the weight of it somewhere inside her, tucking it into a part of her memory that no one can monetize. The voiceover begins. Beatrice recorded from a recent podcast. "We don't need pity. We don't need to be edited into stories that don't belong to us. We need to be seen, not when we're crying, not when we're dying, but when we are still thinking, building, being." The screen darkens. One last image fades in Beatrice walking through a corridor at the Museum of Flight. Her silhouette small but unwavering beneath the wing of a retired shuttle. She pauses beside a plaque with her name on it. The camera lingers on her fingers as they brush the metal. The plaque doesn't say grandmother, it says Beatrice Monroe, systems architect, problem solver, truth teller. She turns to walk on. The music fades. The final text appears on the screen in white, inspired by real events happening every day. Listen to the elderly not when they cry, but when they want to live.